Hey, what's going on there, friends? Hope you're all doing well. I am back feeling rested and refreshed, getting ready today to dive into a review of the 3000 XT series lineup of processors from AMD, which is officially launching today with 3 new CPUs in the third generation of Ryzen processors, which is really just a refresh of the processors which came out last year. So, spoiler alert, I'm sure you've already seen some videos showing up in your subscription feeds. These processors are not very interesting. I'm going to get that out there right now. If you've already seen all of the data and the information on the 3900X, 3800X, and 3600X, then you have already pretty much seen the data on these processors. There is virtually nothing new here whatsoever. These are basically performing identically to those CPUs, and they're selling at the MSRP that those launch for, even though those are actually selling now cheaper than what they came out a year ago. So there's really not a whole lot to discuss with these processors, I'm being perfectly honest with you. But AMD was kind enough to send these out to me, which I am always appreciative of, to be able to get a hands-on look at anything new, especially in advance before it comes out and hits the market. So we're going to be talking about these processors here today. We've got some gaming performance, which we are going to go over because I feel like that's probably the thing that's going to be of interest to most people. But yeah, as I said, spoiler, there's really not a whole lot going on here, as you would expect. With this refresh, they really didn't do a whole lot. We're talking about a 100 megahertz uptick in turbo clock on 2 out of these 3 processors. One got kicked up 200 megahertz, and the prices are what the X series launched at a year ago at MSRP, which you can now find anywhere from $50 to $70, maybe even $100 cheaper in some circumstances. With something like the 3800X, you can find those for about $289 right now, whereas the 3800 XT is launching for $399. So it's more than $100 above what you can find a processor from AMD, which is identical, even though these do, I guess, have slightly better silicon, as they're kind of like bin processors. You can get a small amount of overclocking performance over the previous generation, or I don't know if you can call it previous generation, the unrefreshed models of these CPUs. So I did run some gaming benchmarks on these CPUs here. I was running this on an ASRock X570 Tai-Chi motherboard, along with 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RAM, which was clocked at 3200 megahertz, and I was using an RTX 2080 Ti Founders Edition, and that was running on the latest driver from NVIDIA, which was 451.48. So since there's so much data on the screen right now, I split up the games into 2 separate graphs, because I tried putting I believe it was 7 games onto one graph, but testing with 6 different processors, it was just way too much information on one screen at a single time. So I tried to spread it out over a couple of graphs as best I could here. So on the graph here, you're seeing Battlefield 5, Metro Exodus, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. These were benchmarked at 1080p on the Ultra preset, as you can see, notated at the top with the RTX 2080 Ti Founders. And this is just your average FPS, and you can see there's really nothing remarkable happening here. These are just all 6 of the different processors here from AMD, with the 3900 XT all the way to the left, and then in descending order going down to the 3600X, and there is really nothing that stands out here, honestly. I mean, you can see that in something like Battlefield 5, the less cores and threads do seem to be impacting the performance of the game, a little bit, but, not a ton. But really, the story here is the, generation to generation, if you could even call it that, of the refresh with something like the 3900X and the 3900 XT, only a 1 FPS difference. And then with the 3800 XT and the 3800X, identical performance at 179 average. And then there was a little bit of a disparity there, but that's still 3 FPS difference on the Ryzen 5 processors. Still, I would say 3 FPS is kind of falling within the margin of error. I wouldn't say we're seeing a massive uplift from the slight frequency uptick here of the 3600 XT. It's pretty much neck and neck across the board, for one generation to the other. Obviously, more cores, more threads can have an impact positively or negatively. As you could see with something like Metro Exodus, actually having the more cores and threads seem to hurt the 3900 processors, where having the 8 cores and the 6 cores performed almost identically here. Again, really nothing interesting. There's not a whole lot to talk about. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is even closer, with like most of 3 of them getting 192 average FPS, 193 on the 3900 XT. Just nothing here really stands out as alarming as far as gaming performance is concerned. And I'll go ahead and throw up the next 4 games here, which again, nothing really too shocking standing out, although Civilization 6, as we know with that title, does like the extra cores and threads, certainly, but still generation to generation, the performance difference is negligible, only seeing about a 1 or 2, maybe 4 FPS difference here with the 3900X and the 3900 XT, which I think was like the biggest difference in any of the 7 games that I tested. And Witcher 3, going across that is almost like a flat curve. So virtually no difference, any substantial sort of difference in gaming performance from one year to the next with this refresh from AMD on these Ryzen processors. So exactly who are these going to be for? Well, I mean, I guess if, the prices ever come down in parity with the previous, I don't even feel right calling it the previous generation, because it's really not. It's just the X variants versus the XT. So if the XTs ever eventually line up and come within parity of the X series, then I guess you can go ahead and get one of these, as you're going to get the 100 megahertz slightly higher clock speed right out of the box, which anyone can do anyway. Like, as long as you're comfortable, overclocking, you can go ahead and put that on there, do your all-core overclock yourself and be able to do something exactly identical to what the X series was able to do with these XT series of processors. And this is, leading up to this launch, that's kind of what I was afraid was going to happen, and that ended up being the case here as well. With these CPUs. So really nothing has changed here. We're just getting slightly better silicon, as you could expect to maybe see some, marginally better overclocks. I was able to get another 100 megahertz overclock on the 3900 XT, which was the only one I tried overclocking. I was able to get that up to 4.5 gigahertz all-core, where previously the 3900X I was able to run at 4.4 gigahertz all-core. So I was able to get 100 megahertz there all-core. Obviously, the advertised turbo boost is not going to be on all cores all the time. It's going to be, your best cores on the processor. And, you can try to go ahead and hit that 4.7 all-core, and you might get lucky and hit the silicon lottery and be able to do that, with a decent cooler. But really, just right out of the box, you're probably going to be seeing not 4.7 all-core. It's going to be closer in the 4 gigahertz range. But you can, as I said, you can OC these things and get them running on all-core. But the XT series lineup, as far as the overclocking potential, I don't think it's really there to make an argument to say, okay, I'm going to go and spend the extra $70 or $100 versus what the X series can be found at retail right now. I wouldn't say it's worth spending the extra $100 or so, or whatever it is, $50 to $100, let's say, on average, on any of these processors, in hopes of saying, oh, I'm going to get this because it's going to be a much better overclocker. I'm going to be able to get an extra 100 megahertz or extra 200 megahertz. I still think for that, it's still not really even worth it. I would go for the X series, save yourself some money. As I said, the 3800X processors right now you can find for around $280, which is $120 less than the XT variant. So that's a really good deal. That's a very, very good deal, actually. And I would definitely say go out there and grab one of those up if you are in the market for a processor. But, we've got exciting things still to come from AMD later this year. And, of course, we did recently see the Intel 10th gen lineup of processors, where I thought the 10600K was probably the belle of the ball in terms of that lineup, and still one of the more recommended processors out there. But, with these, it's just really not a whole lot to be excited about. You're really wanting to wait for the 4000 series, the Zen 3. That is where we're going to see the performance gains in IPC and the stuff that you guys are really into, learning about, and that I'm into benchmarking and testing. With these, nothing really that exciting, which is why I just, benchmarked some games, because I wasn't seeing the differences there. Even in something like I ran Cinebench R20, the single core was a little bit faster, which you expect if it's clocked a little bit higher, but multi-threading performance was pretty much identical. So yeah, can I recommend these processors? Not really at the price, only because you can get the 3000X series processors for cheaper right now. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with these CPUs in any way whatsoever. You know, they're slightly binned versions of those, and they cost $50 to $100, maybe even $120 more, depending on sales and stuff like that and what day of the week it is. So yeah, it's a hard recommendation at the current price, but it's not a recommendation because of anything that they're doing wrong with the processors themselves. Like, they still work just as well as the 3000 series of processors, but that's also sort of the caveat there, is that they work just as well as something that you can get for cheaper right now. So that would be my recommendation. If you want a Ryzen processor right now and you don't want to wait for Zen 3, the 4000 series later this year, then grab yourself an X variant and probably not one of the XT ones. You know, I'm not sure exactly what AMD's motivation was behind this, clearing out some inventory, you know, or whatever, just trying to, I don't know, because we only got like 5 months left in the year, and we're expected to see Zen 3 by the end of the year, so we don't have that much longer to wait for those. So that's would be my advice probably to most people, is to wait, and then you'll probably see the price on these, as well as the X variants, probably come down even a little bit further. But I'm gonna go ahead and get on out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick look at the XT series of processors. I wish we had a lot more to go on. I really do. I was hoping for, you know, maybe something to really surprise me with these CPUs, but sadly it just didn't. So I'm gonna get out of here. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a comment, thumbs up on this video, and I will catch you guys tomorrow for another one. Ta-ra.